You pick up a single grain of sand. It is not a heap. You pick up another. Still not a heap. A third, a fourth, a fifth, no heap. Yet you keep going. 10, 20, 50. And then, suddenly, there is a heap. But when did that happen? At what precise grain did the not heap become the heap? You can't answer. No one can. This is the Sorites paradox. A paradox of gradual change, of thresholds that vanish under close inspection. It appears harmless, almost trivial, just semantics. But it sits like a virus in the foundations of logic. If a single grain isn't a heap, and adding one grain doesn't make it a heap, then how can any number of grains, added one by one, ever become a heap? You feel it now. That slip, the world, doesn't change in clear steps, and yet, somehow, it does. You were once a child, you are now not, but you were never not you. So when did you become this? And what else have you become without noticing? The ship of Theseus, identity as decay, identity a ship, ancient, wooden, Greek, each year. A plank is removed and replaced with a fresh one. Eventually, every part is new. Not a single original plank remains. Is it still the same ship? Now imagine. Someone had taken all the discarded pieces and rebuilt the original. Which one is the real ship of Theseus? This isn't just about boats. It's about you. Every cell in your body has changed. Every molecule. Your memories flicker and fade, altered each time they're recalled. And yet, you say I. You say it with confidence. But what are you referring to? If identity can survive total replacement, then what is it that we are preserving? Or worse, what are we pretending to preserve? Zeno's paradox's motion enchains you, want to walk across the room. Simple enough. But to get there, you must first reach the halfway point. Before that, the quarter mark. Before that, the eighth. An infinite number of points, each requiring you to arrive before the next dot. So how do you move at all? This is Zeno's paradox, specifically the dichotomy paradox. It says that movement is impossible because it requires completing an infinite number of tasks. But you walk every day. You move without hesitation. So, are your legs defying logic? Or is your perception lying? Modern mathematics says the sum of all those halves is finite. But Zeno's real trap wasn't numbers. It was assumption. You assumed space and time were continuous. You assumed the world behaved in steps small enough to matter. But what if motion isn't real? What if you were just flickering through positions like frames in a film, and causality is the illusion between them? The barber paradox, self-swallowing rules. In a small town, a barber shaves all those and only those who do not shave themselves. So, does the barber shave himself? If he does, he must not. If he doesn't, he must. This is a paradox of self-reference. And it doesn't just mess with razors. It lives in logic, in set theory, in programming. It's the ghost that haunted Bertrand Russell and broke naive mathematics. Systems cannot fully contain themselves. They buckle when asked to observe themselves cleanly, and yet you observe yourself. Or do you? What part of you watches the watching? What is it that is aware of your awareness? And what happens when that loop never resolves? The paradox of tolerance, when acceptance eats itself. Society that tolerates all things, including intolerance, will eventually destroy itself to maintain tolerance. It must not tolerate the intolerant, but then it is intolerant. This is Karl Popper's paradox. and it burns through the foundations of liberal democracy, free speech, and ethical consistency. You want a world of open minds. But how open is to open? If you reject the voices of hate, are you defending kindness or enforcing silence? What if the act of protecting peace requires violence? Where is the line between justice and control? And who draws it when the ink keeps bleeding? The paradox of choice. Freedom that paralyzes more choices mean more freedom. Freedom means more happiness. Right then, why do people break down in supermarket aisles? Why do more options make us less satisfied? Why do we regret more the more we could have done? This is the paradox of choice, as documented by psychologist Barry Schwartz. Too many options overload the mind. You fear making the wrong one, and every decision excludes all others, ghosts of futures never lived. You think freedom means limitless possibility, but maybe it just means limitless regret. You're here now, lying still. But what else could you be doing? Who else could you have been? And how many of those roads did you murder just by choosing this one? The liar paradox. Truth implodes. This statement is false. If it's true, it's false. If it's false, it's true. You've heard this one before. It's a joke, right? A curiosity. But it's also a rupture, a hole in the fabric of logic itself. It breaks binary truth. It breaks the law of non-contradiction. It whispers into language, computer code, moral philosophy. It says, there may be no clean line between falsehood and truth. No clean anything. How? Can you trust any system built from language when language itself can collapse into contradiction? And if words can't be trusted, what else have you built your mind upon? Maxwell's demon, order from nowhere. Imagine a tiny demon in a box. It opens and closes a door, letting only fast-moving molecules to one side, slow ones to the other. Without adding energy, it creates a temperature difference, violating the second law of thermodynamics, entropy reversed. Of course, modern physics finds ways to resolve it. The demon must know the particle's speeds. That knowledge has a cost. Information, it turns out, isn't free. But what if the demon is just a metaphor for your own mind? Your memory sorts experiences. Your attention sifts reality. Is your consciousness just Maxwell's demon, pretending to be outside the system it's part of? And if you can break the rules of the system from inside it, are they even rules at all? Giggles, incompleteness, the unprovable truth. Every consistent system of logic is incomplete. There will always be truths that cannot be proven within the system. This is Giggles' incompleteness theorem, and it destroyed the dream of total knowledge. Mathematicians wanted certainty. Gödel gave them doubt. Irrefutable, unerasable doubt. There are things that are true, but can never be proven. So how do you know anything? And what if the deepest truths of your life are the ones you'll never be able to name? Quantum superposition, dead and not dead. Schrödinger's cat. You've heard it. You know it. A cat in a sealed box is both alive and dead until observed. But this isn't a joke. It's not just a metaphor. It's the consequence of real quantum equations. Particles don't have definite states until measured. Reality doesn't. Pick a lane until you look dot. So what is the universe doing when no one's watching? And if observation creates reality, then what created you? Imagine you leave Earth, board a spaceship, and accelerate to near light speed. You drift through the vacuum, decades in your mind. Then you return. You haven't aged much, but your twin back on Earth is old. Their hair is white, their hands brittle. You barely recognize them. This is the twin paradox, born from Einstein's theory of relativity. Time dilates as velocity increases. Clocks tick slower on fast-moving ships. But this isn't science fiction. It's measured, verified. Satellites account for it every second. So what is time? You thought it was constant. But time changes depending on how fast you move and where you are. If time can bend, can you ever trust your own memories? And if your twin lived a life you didn't, which of you really moved forward? The Monty Hall problem, knowing is not knowing. You're on a game show. 3 doors, 1 prize, 2 goats. You choose a door. The host, who knows what's behind the doors, opens one of the others, revealing a goat. Then he asks, "Do you want to switch your choice?" You should. Statistically, your chances improve from 1/3 to 2/3. But it doesn't feel that way. It feels like a trick, a manipulation of instinct. This is the Monty Hall problem. Your brain rebels against it. You trust your gut, but your gut was built for forests and fire, not conditional probability. How many other things feel true, but aren't? And how often are you sure of something only because you misunderstood the game? The observer effect. Watching changes, the watched in quantum physics. Observing a particle alters its state. Photons collapse. Electrons choose positions. Measurement itself changes the thing measured. But it's not just atoms. In psychology, people behave differently when watched. In sociology, data shifts when collected. In surveillance states, citizens act like shadows. You think you know the world, but every time you look, you change it. Even your reflection in the mirror is altered by your gaze. So what is real? Can you ever see anything truly, if your very act of seeing rewrites the script? And if everything changes under observation, what does that say about you when you're alone? The Bootstrap Paradox, the book with no author or scientist, builds a time machine. She travels to the past and hands Shakespeare a copy of Hamlet. Shakespeare publishes it as his own. Centuries later, the scientist reads Hamlet and uses it to inspire her time machine, which she uses to travel back and give him the play. Where did Hamlet come from? This is the Bootstrap Paradox, an object or idea without origin, a causal loop that feeds itself. Information appears, detached from any beginning. Your mind screams for a source, but none exists. So how many of your ideas, your memories are just echoes with no beginning? If something can exist without cause, why not everything? And if your thoughts are recursive, how do you know which ones were ever yours? The grandfather paradox, killing the route to travel back in time. You kill your grandfather before your parent is born, which means you're never born, which means you couldn't have gone back in time, which means you didn't kill him, which means you were born, and so on, and so on. This is the grandfather paradox, a violation of causality, a timeline that eats itself. Some physicists solve it with parallel universes, some with closed time-like curves, some don't solve it at all. But the real terror isn't in logic, it's in implication. If changing the past is impossible, is the future locked? And if you can't alter where you came from, can you ever escape where you're going? Newcomb's paradox, the game you cannot win, sealed box sits before you. Beside it, a transparent one containing $1,000. You have 2 options. Take only the sealed box. Take both boxes. Here's the twist. A superintelligent predictor, has already decided what's inside. If it predicted you'd take both, the sealed box is empty. If it predicted you'd take only one, it contains $1,000. Oh. It has never been wrong. So what do you choose? This is Newcomb's paradox, a war between free will and prediction. You want both. You want to outsmart the system, but the system already knows you. What if all your choices are just the unfolding of predictions already made? What if the illusion of freedom is just the feeling of not knowing you've already decided? Mobius strip, the one-sided universe. Take a strip of paper, twist it once, tape the ends. Now run your finger along the surface. You'll never cross an edge, and yet you'll cover both sides. There is no inside or outside, no top or bottom. This is the Mobius strip, a shape that folds space into a paradox of perspective. You live in a body. You call some things self, others world. But where is the edge? Where do you end? If a shape can have one side and two at once, how many layers does your mind wear pretending they're separate? And if inside and outside are illusions, what exactly are you protecting? The paradox of fiction, feeling what isn't. Who cry at movies? You flinch during nightmares. You feel rage for people who never lived. This is the paradox of fiction. You know the story isn't real, but your body doesn't. Philosophers can't fully explain it. How can you grieve something you don't believe? But you do. Every day your mind doesn't need reality. It just needs coherence. So how many of your memories are just well-told stories? And how do you know you're not living one now? Hilbert's Hotel Infinity's madness. Imagine a hotel with infinite rooms. Every room is full. A new guest arrives. No problem shift. Each current guest one room over. Now room 1 is free. Another infinite bus arrives. Still not a problem. Just shift everyone to room 2N. Odd rooms open. This is Hilbert's Hotel, a thought experiment in actual infinity. It reveals how infinity breaks arithmetic, reason, sanity. Infinity isn't just large, it's wrong. So when you look up at the stars, when you think about forever, are you imagining something that cannot be? And if your soul is infinite, is it just a hotel with no end, no beginning, and nowhere to truly rest? Zeno returns, but this time with a tortoise. And Achilles, the swift-footed hero, challenges it to a race. Achilles gives the tortoise a small head start, and then he runs. By the time Achilles reaches the tortoise's starting point, the tortoise has moved a little forward. Achilles reaches that new point, but the tortoise has moved again. Always just ahead, always moving. The gap shrinks, but never disappears. This is Zeno's Achilles paradox, a trap of infinite divisions. Math tells us the sum of those intervals is finite. Achilles wins, but the paradox doesn't care. It whispers not of distance, but sequence. No matter how fast you run, you will never catch the future, because the future moves with each step. So how do you know you're ever arriving? And what if every goal is just a tortoise, slow, absurd, and always beyond your fingertips? The paradox of self-deception. Lying to know the truth. You'll tell yourself you'll start tomorrow, that they loved you, that you're fine. You know these things aren't true, but you believe them anyway. Because you must. This is self-deception. To lie and believe the lie at the same time. A psychological paradox. How can you believe what you know is false? How can the same mind contain both truth and denial? Split yourself, wound your perception, convince one part to pretend, and silence the rest. This isn't weakness, it's survival. But if your mind must lie to itself to function, what part of you can ever be trusted? And who's really steering the ship when the captain keeps hiding maps from himself? The paradox of free will chains you choose, you believe. In choice, in agency, in freedom. You made 100 decisions today, but did you? Neuroscientist Benjamin Libet showed brain signals predicting decisions before conscious awareness. Milliseconds before you chose, your body had already acted. This is Libet's paradox. Free will as afterthought, illusion. You feel like a driver, but what if you're just the narrator, explaining events that were already set in motion? If your brain decides before you do, then who is you? And if your choices aren't real, why do you feel guilty? The two envelopes paradox. The trap of Morior given to envelopes. One contains twice as much money as the other. You choose one. Before opening it, you're offered a switch. Should you take it? If you assume your envelope has $X, the other must have either $2X or $X2. Mathematically, switching seems to always give you a better expected value, which makes no sense, so you switch, and again, and again. The paradox traps you in an infinite loop of uncertainty, chasing gains that don't exist. But this isn't about money, it's about regret, about the human obsession with what if. You're always holding one envelope, and always wondering what you left behind. So how do you ever stop switching? And what have you already thrown away while chasing something that was never there? The lottery paradox. One truth, many lies. Imagine a lottery with 1 million tickets. Only one will win. You look at a ticket, it probably won't win. You look at another, also unlikely. You repeat this thought 1 million times, and each individual judgment seems true, but collectively they cannot be. One of those tickets must win. This is the lottery paradox. Rational belief collapsing at scale. You can justify each doubt, but you cannot justify them all. So how many of your convictions are just well-dressed guesses? And when your mind piles up probably nots into definitely not, what certainty have you accidentally killed? The raven paradox. Seeing the absence, all ravens are black. You see a black raven that supports the statement, but then you see a green apple. It's not a raven, and it's not black. Logically, that also supports the statement. This is the raven paradox, a flaw in how confirmation works. Every non-black non-raven strengthens the rule, which means every object you see that isn't a raven and isn't black is more evidence. But does that make sense? Can you prove something by observing its absence? And if your truths grow stronger with every irrelevant detail, what have you mistaken for fact? Baridan's ass, starving between two equal truths. Say, donkey is placed between two identical piles of hay. Same size, same distance, it cannot choose. It starves. This is Baridan's ass. The absurdity of perfect rationality. When no option is better, no decision is made. Indecision becomes death. But this isn't about donkeys. This is about you. How many times have you waited, paused, hesitated? Not because you lacked options, but because you had too many. If balance is indistinguishable from paralysis, is rationality just a beautiful way to rot? The problem of evil faith torn open. If God is all-powerful and all-good, then why is there suffering? This is the problem of evil, as old as theology. You can say suffering is part of a plan, that we cannot understand it, that it's for growth. But then, Why infants in agony? Why torture? Why cancer in the bones of children? You want order, but the world bleeds chaos. So is your belief wrong? Or is the universe worse than wrong, indifferent? And if there is a higher being watching this unfold, what kind of thing chooses to watch? Russell's teapot. The burden of belief. Bertrand Russell proposed a teapot, floating in space, between Earth and Mars. Too small to detect. You can't disprove it. But does that mean it's real? This is Russell's teapot, a lesson in burden of proof. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And yet, how many beliefs hide behind the veil of invisibility? You believe in justice, in love, in meaning. Can you prove them? Or are you just drinking from a celestial teapot, sweetened with the sugar of certainty? The paradox of omnipotence. The rock that breaks God. Can an omnipotent being create a rock so heavy that even it cannot lift it? If yes, it's not omnipotent. If no, it's still not. This is the omnipotence paradox. A limit on limit. And listeners, it slices divine power with its own definition, but it also slices you, because you want to believe in possibility, in a being or a part of yourself that can overcome all limits. But can you build a self so broken that even your will cannot lift it? And what if you already have? You remember your childhood bedroom, the color of the walls, the smell of warm dust on the window ledge, the creak of the floor near the closet. You're certain, but you're wrong. Studies show memory is not a recording, it's a reconstruction. Each time you remember, you rewrite. Elizabeth Loftus demonstrated this. By changing a single word, she changed memories of car crashes, from contacted to smashed. Suddenly, glass appeared that wasn't there. Your mind does not store facts. It stores stories, so what do you actually remember? And if every recollection degrades the original, how much of your past is just fiction you've told too many times? What if your entire identity is a novel, written in bad lighting, with a trembling hand? The paradox of the simulation. Pixels or particles. A universe made of code. Simulated. Observed only when observed. Rendered only when necessary. Philosopher Nick Bostrom argued that if simulations are possible, and civilizations run many of them, you're probably inside one. Not in metaphor, literally, your table, a render, your breath, a loop, your pain. A program. Quantum physics doesn't help. Particles collapse into definite states only when measured, as if the universe is optimizing processing power. So where's the server? And if you ever looked outside the simulation, would your eyes be allowed to see? The paradox of pain. Why suffering persists. Pain is useful. It protects you. A signal to move your hand from the flame. But what about chronic pain? Phantom limbs that burn when the limb is gone. Emotional agony that returns without trigger. This is the paradox. Pain continues, even when it no longer serves. Neurologist V.S. Ramachandran treated phantom limb pain with mirrors. Illusions, easing illusion. The suffering was real, but the source gone. Your mind doesn't need cause to produce torment. Just memory, just anticipation. So what else are you still hurting from that never even existed? And what if your pain is just the ghost of a warning that was never heard? The paradox of infinity. Bigger than everything, there are more numbers than stars. You can count forever, but then there are more real numbers than integers. More infinities than infinity. Georg Cantor proved this. Infinity has sizes. The set of all whole numbers is infinite. but the set of all points between 0 and 1 is more infinite. It shattered mathematics and broke Cantor's mind. How can something be bigger than forever? And if even infinity isn't whole, what is? How can you ever feel complete, when completion doesn't even exist at the edge of all things? The paradox of desire, wanting what hurts you, want love. But when you get too close, you run. You crave success. But when you have it, you sabotage it. Freud called this repetition compulsion, returning to pain again and again. You chase what destroys you, not because you're broken, but because you're trying to understand. Desire becomes a loop, a paradox. You need what hurts, and you hurt what you need. So what part of you keeps turning the wheel? And who are you when you finally get what you've always wanted, and feel nothing at all? The paradox of omniscience. Knowing too much to know can, a being know everything, all facts, all futures, all minds. But to know everything, it must know what it's like not to know. But if it truly knows what it's like not to know, then it doesn't know everything. This paradox circles endlessly, a trap in logic's attempt to stretch beyond itself. But it applies to you, to Dot. Can you understand someone's pain without feeling it? Can you grasp grief without drowning in it? If complete understanding requires stepping outside yourself, what are you once you've stepped? The paradox of sleep. Consciousness betrays itself. You lie in bed. You want to sleep, but the wanting prevents the sleep. You monitor your thoughts, checking for silence, but the checking is noise. This is a paradox of intention. You cannot will unconsciousness. It must sneak up, uninvited, so you practice letting go. But that practice itself is grasping. Sleep becomes an unreachable place, only entered by those who stop trying to arrive. So how do you surrender, when the act of surrender is itself an act? And what if your deepest peace can only come when you stop seeking peace? The paradox of hedonism, chasing joy, losing it, pursue happiness, and it flees. Ignore it, and it arrives. This is the paradox of hedonism. Pleasure, when sought directly, dissolves. Like trying to hold sunlight. Viktor Frankl saw this in concentration camps. Those who clung to happiness broke. Those who found meaning in something else survived. You want joy, but joy comes sideways, as byproduct, not goal. So how many of your smiles have been ruined by trying to hold them? And how do you know you're happy if you have to keep asking? The paradox of the present, now, already, gone you say now. But by the time you've said it, it's over. Augustine said, "What is time? If no one asks me, I know. If I try to explain, I do not." The present is ungraspable. By the time you observe it, it's already the past. And the future, an endless chain of almosts. So what is real? What moment do you truly live in? You plan, you reminisce, you act, but you never touch now. So where are you, if not in your own life? The paradox of the brain. The organ that thinks itself your brain is a lump of flesh, grey, wet, electrical. It generates thoughts, emotions, dreams. But it also observes those thoughts, watches itself, judges itself. You are a mind inside a mind, inside a loop of neurons that don't know you exist. How can a system understand itself? How? Can the map include the map maker? You think you're conscious, but the one thinking is made of the thing being thought. So who's looking out from behind your eyes? And if the watcher is part of the watched, is there anyone home? You sit in silence, but it isn't quiet. Your breath, your heartbeat, the buzz in your ears, you try to listen harder, and that very act creates sound. The silence recedes, always out of reach. This is the paradox of silence. To observe silence is to destroy it. It cannot exist in the presence of awareness. In an anechoic chamber, one of the quietest places on earth, people begin to hallucinate, to panic. The absence becomes noise. Too much quiet becomes unbearable. Silence is not the lack of sound, it's the absence of the self who listens. So if you ever truly heard nothing, would there be anything left of you to hear it? And if silence is impossible while you exist, what does that say about death? The paradox of trust. The more you need it, the less you should give it to trust someone, because you believe they won't betray you. But if betrayal were impossible, trust wouldn't mean anything. For trust to be real, it must be vulnerable. It must include the possibility of being broken. And so, the more you depend on trust, the more dangerous it becomes. This is the paradox of trust. You cannot have certainty and trust at once. To trust is to leap into uncertainty willingly. But you've been hurt, so you build walls. And behind those walls, you grow lonely. And the longer you stay there, the more terrifying it becomes to open the door. So when you trust again, is that strength or surrender? And if trust must risk ruin to be real, how many times can you afford to believe? The paradox of the unexpected. Hanging the day you cannot know, a judge tells a prisoner, you will be hanged next week. It will be a surprise. You will not know the day. The prisoner thinks it through. It can't be Friday, he'd know by Thursday. Then not Thursday, either he'd know by Wednesday. He eliminates every day, so he relaxes. But on Wednesday they come. He is surprised. This is the unexpected hanging paradox, a loop of logic that destroys itself. The moment you reason it out, it turns against you. It lives in self-reference, in recursion, in any thought that tries to see its own shadow. So what else are you predicting, only to guarantee it never arrives? And if surprise can only exist when you stop trying to anticipate it, what joy have you already ruined by thinking too much? The paradox of the self. You are not what you think you are your name, your memories, your voice. But if we erase your memories, are you still you? If your name changes, do you vanish? The Buddhist concept of unitono self claims, there is no fixed core, no soul, just processes, experiences, bouncing off each other, like echoes in an empty room. Neuroscience agrees. No central observer, no I behind your eyes. You are the byproduct of a machine that insists it is more than machinery. So what are you defending when you say, this is who I am? And if there's no self, who's asking the question? The paradox of choice blindness. You don't know what you chose. Ayoya shown to faces. You pick the more attractive one, but the researcher secretly switches the photo, hands you the one you didn't choose, then asks, why did you choose this one? You explain confidently, in detail, even though it's not the one you chose. This is choice blindness, a psychological phenomenon where you justify decisions you didn't actually make. You fabricate reasons to match outcomes and believe them. So how much of what you think you want was never your choice to begin with? And if your reasons are written after your decisions, who or what made them in the first place? The paradox of causal loops. Effect becomes causae. Scientist finds blueprints in her lab for a time machine. She builds it, travels back, leaves the plans on the desk of her younger self. Where did the plans come from? This is a causal loop, an event with no origin. Effect causes cause. a circle that writes itself. Science fiction, sure, but also physics. Einstein's equations allow closed time-like curves, loopholes in space. So what is the origin of your ideas, your inspiration, your grief? If some things have no beginning, what makes you so sure that you do? The paradox of identity over time. You change, yet stay the same year. Not the same person you were 10 years ago. Not biologically, not emotionally, not ideologically, and yet you feel continuous, as if there is a thread, something unbroken. But what is it? Your memories, they fade. Your values, they shift. If you met your younger self on the street, would you agree on anything? So what defines you? And if the answer keeps changing, what does that say about the person falling asleep in this bed? Are you the one who made today's choices, or just the one forced to live with them? The paradox of knowing you are dreaming, lucid but powerless. You realize you're dreaming, a lucid dream. You can fly, change the sky, summon oceans, and yet you still feel fear, still act irrationally, still wake up shaken. Knowing it's a dream doesn't make it safe, or sensible, or yours. This is the lucid dream paradox. Awareness without control, consciousness without sovereignty. You can watch, but you can't always steer. So what else in your waking life feels like choice, but isn't? And if you can't fully control your own mind in a dream, who's controlling it when you're awake? The paradox of Schwedgener's friend, layers of collapse. Imagine not just Schwedgener's cat, but someone outside the lab. A friend observes the box, collapsing the wave function. But what if another observer, outside the room, hasn't yet seen the result? To them, the entire room is in superposition, cat, friend, and all. This is Wigner's friend paradox. It suggests that collapse is subjective, observer dependent. Reality might not just depend on being seen. It may depend on who sees it. So what is truth, if different minds hold different realities? And what happens to your world when the only one watching is you? The paradox of mortality salience. Thinking of death changes you when reminded of death. You cling harder to your culture, your beliefs, your tribe. This is terror management theory. Studies show that mortality salience, awareness of death, makes people more aggressive, more defensive, more closed-minded. The fear of death distorts the way we live. You cannot escape it, but the more you think about it, the more it changes you. So how can you prepare for something that reshapes you the moment you look at it? And if the fear of dying is what makes you alive, what are you when that fear finally disappears? You believe you are in control. You speak, you act, you feel. But Freud said, beneath the conscious mind, there is another, a darker, hidden engine. It stores your traumas, twists your desires, slips through in dreams, in slips of the tongue, in irrational fears. You suppress it. But that suppression is the symptom, and worse. Modern neuroscience agrees. Most decisions are made before you're aware of them. Consciousness, just a story your brain tells after the fact. This is the unconscious paradox. You believe you're the pilot, but you're the narrator, and the plane is flying itself. So how can you trust any thought when you weren't the one who thought it? And if your true self is buried, who's sleeping here now? The paradox of the map, the model, is not the world-day perfect map, would be the size of the territory. Every tree, every grain of sand. But then, it would be the territory, and no longer useful. This is the map territory paradox. To understand reality, you must distort it. All models simplify. All language reduces. Every belief is a cartoon drawn over something unfathomably complex. Your brain is a map. It doesn't see the world, just signals, filters, shortcuts. You never touch the thing itself. So what are you missing every second you live? And how much of what you believe is just a paper sketch of something that never fit on paper? The paradox of the mirror seeing without seeing. You stand before a mirror. You see yourself, but that reflection is reversed. Left and right, flipped, not top and bottom. Why? The mirror shows what you show, but only from a place you can never occupy. You cannot see your own face directly, only reflections, only images, and yet your identity is built on that image. That flipped phantom, you trust it, you know it, but you've never truly seen yourself. So what else have you mistaken for reality, just because it looked familiar? And if the thing you most recognize is always a lie, who are you really reflecting? The paradox of suffering, necessary or cruel. You suffer, so does everyone. And people say, suffering builds strength. It gives life meaning. It's part of the human condition. But what if it isn't? What if that's just what we say to survive the unbearable? You look at tragedy and call it profound, but is that wisdom or surrender? This is the suffering paradox. You assign meaning to pain because the alternative is that it was meaningless. So, are you growing or just justifying? And if pain doesn't make you stronger, what was the point of all this? The paradox of other minds. You will never know. You talk, you connect, you love, but you have never and will never experience another person's consciousness. Not truly, not directly. You assume they have minds, like you, but you can't prove it. This is the problem of other minds. You live surrounded by masks, smiles, words, expressions, but behind them, unknown. So how much of your love is just projection? And if everyone around you is a mirror, who is really there to love back? The paradox of emotion, rational and wild. You feel anger, sadness, joy. You say, this is irrational. But emotions are reactions to perceived truths. Your brain evaluates, judges, responds before you can stop it. They are not separate from reason. They are reason running deeper than words. So, when your feelings conflict with facts, which do you trust? This is the emotion paradox. Logic without emotion is directionless. Emotion without logic is chaos. You need both, but they pull you in opposite directions. So how do you know when your compass points true? And if your feelings are valid, even when they lie, what's left to believe? The paradox of attention. The more you focus, the more you missing. 1999. Psychologists asked people to count basketball passes. Midway through the video, a person in a gorilla suit walks through the scene. Half the participants never saw it. This is inattentional blindness. You see what you expect and miss what you don't. You believe your eyes show you reality, but really, they just show you what your mind thinks is important. So what have you missed? Not because it was hidden, but because you never looked. And how do you know you're awake if the gorilla can walk through your life and disappear? The paradox of knowing the self, the thing that cannot see itself. Say I, but who is speaking? You observe your thoughts, but who is the observer? This is the self-reference problem. The eye trying to see itself, the knife trying to cut itself. No matter how deep you go, you never find the you behind the thoughts. Just more thoughts. Meditation traditions call this the illusion of self. Neuroscience calls it the default mode network. You are a story, told by a machine that doesn't know it's telling a story. So when you lie down tonight and feel yourself drifting, who, exactly, is falling asleep? The paradox of learning: the more you know, the less you understand. You study, you learn, you grow, but every answer births more questions. Every certainty dissolves into complexity. You climb the mountain of knowledge, only to discover there's no summit, just fog and more stairs. This is the paradox of learning. Each truth deepens the void beneath it. So when does knowing become unknowing? And how can you ever feel wise when every revelation reveals just how little you'll ever grasp? The paradox of detachment, freedom that empties you. Detach to protect yourself. You let go. You rise above. At first it feels like peace, but then you feel nothing, no grief, no love, no fire. This is the detachment paradox. You numb the pain, but in doing so, you erase the joy. So is freedom from feeling just another kind of prison. And if nothing can hurt you anymore, is that living? Or is that just waiting? You hold a knife, a blade, a handle, one object. But how much of the handle can you shave away before it's no longer a handle? How thin can the blade become before it's just an idea of sharpness? Where is the edge of a thing? This is the boundary. Paradox. It lives inside the ship of Theseus. It hums in biology, physics, identity. Are your fingers part of you, your hair, your blood? When your thoughts shift, are you still you? When your skin sheds, do you disappear? If the edge of a thing is never clear, then what, exactly, are you trying to protect? And how do you know where you ends and everything else begins? The paradox of introspection. The more you look, the less you see. You turn inward. You analyze, reflect, dissect. You look for answers, and all you find are more questions. You think about your sadness and feed it. You question your thoughts and birth more thoughts. This is the introspection illusion, the belief that the mind can be a microscope aimed at itself. But every layer peels into another. The more you stare, the blurrier it gets. So what if clarity is only possible when you stop searching? And what if the part of you that wants to understand is the very thing making understanding impossible? The paradox of paradoxes, the loop that eats loops. You listen to these paradoxes. One by one, each unravels something. Each leaves a thread untied. But you begin to notice they fold back on each other. Choice collapses into prediction. Self folds into not self. Truth slips into fiction. Observer becomes observed. Paradoxes are not puzzles, they are mirrors. They do not seek answers. They seek your unraveling. Each time you think you've grasped one, you realize you've only slipped deeper into another dot. So what if the universe isn't broken? What if it was never supposed to make sense? And what if meaning is the one paradox you were never meant to solve? The paradox of Sisyphus, the joy of the absurdity. Man rolls a boulder up a hill. It falls. He rolls it again, forever. This is Sisyphus, punished by the gods, trapped in eternal failure. Camus said, one must imagine Sisyphus happy, because in absurdity there is freedom, no hope, no despair, just motion, no meaning, just choice. The paradox is this: when you stop expecting reward, when you stop needing purpose, you become untouchable. So is Sisyphus a prisoner? Or is he more free than you've ever been? And if you let go of the need for the boulder to matter, would it finally feel light? The paradox of time travel, regret changing the past. Breaking the self-imagine, you go back. Fix the moment, you regret. Say the right thing. Avoid the wrong person. You change the past. But then you erase the pain that taught you. You kill the self that grew from it. You dissolve the lessons, the scars, the poetry. You erase the reason you wanted to go back. This is the time travel regret paradox. Change the thing, and you change the one who wanted to change it. So would you even still go back? And if not, then should you ever try? The paradox of closure, the story that never ends. You seek endings. Resolution, the clean arc, but real. Life rarely offers it. The goodbye drags on. The trauma returns. The love doesn't die, just changes form. You crave closure the way a wound craves stitching. But what if the wound is supposed to stay open? What if stories don't end, they just lose narrators? This is the closure paradox in seeking it. You extend the thing you're trying to finish. So when you say you're over it, who are you trying to convince? And if the chapter is closed, why do you still reread the same line every night before sleep? The paradox of solitude, alone together. Together alone, you fear loneliness, yet crave silence. You ache for connection, then flinch from touch. You scroll past faces. You speak in rooms where no one listens. You answer questions no one asked. This is the solitude paradox. You're never truly alone, but you never feel truly known. We live in shared isolation, so when you say you're independent, are you really? And when someone says, I understand, how much of that do you actually believe? The paradox of the final word, silence that speaks. We reach the edge. 50 paradoxes, 50 fractures in reality, 50 reflections of the abyss. You are lying down, but something is still awake. Not quite mind, not quite sleep, just the hum beneath both. Each paradox has left you with a question. None were answered. None can be, because this isn't about solving, it's about dissolving. So here's the final paradox. The end of the story is the part you will hear when you've already fallen asleep. So, if you're still awake, who's listening?